I remember that morning like any other, the kind of quiet Sunday that feels ordinary until you realize it wasn't. The kitchen smelled like coffee, rich and warm, curling into the corners of the house, and the sunlight spilled lazily through the curtains, painting golden stripes across the floor. I was sitting there, cup in hand, scrolling through my phone almost absent-mindedly, thinking about our plans for the day. Nothing unusual, nothing alarming. My marriage, my life, it all seemed stable. My wife and I had always managed the subtle currents of her family, occasional tension over minor disagreements. Yes, but nothing we couldn't handle. In fact, most of the time, things were cordial, polite, even pleasant. And yet, as I sat there, sipping the warmth and watching the light shift, a small voice inside me whispered that something was off. I couldn't place it, not yet, but it was there, lurking behind the familiar comfort. I told myself I was imagining things, that everything was fine. But deep down, I knew I was waiting for the day when the calm would end.it started with a phone call, the kind that makes your heart skip before you even answer. The lawyer's name flashed across the screen, crisp and formal, and I felt a tightening in my chest, though I didn't know why yet. I hesitated for a moment, listening to the soft hum of the house around me, the ticking of the clock, the distant sound of traffic, and then swiped to answer. His voice was calm, professional, but there was an edge I couldn't ignore. He began, talking about my wife's father's will, something routine in theory, but the words hit like a splash of cold water. Something wasn't right. My hand shook slightly as I gripped the phone, the coffee forgotten on the counter. I tried to steady my voice, tried to process the information logically, but all I could feel was confusion, like I'd been pulled into a room I didn't even know existed. This isn't what I expected, I thought, my mind racing. Did I misread the situation? Or was this something that had been building under the surface all along? The familiar comfort of our Sunday morning was gone, replaced with a silent tension that pressed into my chest, leaving me unsure of what I'd face next. That's when it hit me. My wife's mother had cut her out of her father's will. The words lingered in my mind, heavy and impossible to shake. For hating the family, the lawyer had said almost offhandedly, but to us, it felt like a punch straight to the chest. I could feel the walls of our living room closing in as the truth settled. I remembered flashes from the past, family, dinners where laughter felt strained, the sideways glances during holidays, small comments that at the time seemed inconsequential but now screamed with meaning. I tried to trace back every visit, every conversation, every gesture that might have been misinterpreted. The quiet cordiality we had relied on seemed like a fragile veneer, hiding something far darker. My wife sat across from me, her hands clenching into fists in her lap, eyes wide and distant. The room smelled faintly of coffee and disappointment, mingling in a way that made the air almost suffocating. I wanted to ask questions, to understand, but words caught in my throat. How could something so deep have grown without us noticing? The thought gnawed at me. Had we really been blind, or had they been holding this resentment all along, waiting for the perfect moment to strike? I found myself drifting back into memories I had long pushed aside, replaying moments that suddenly felt like pieces of a puzzle I didn't want to see completed. The birthdays we'd missed, the offhand comments that now seemed sharp, the dinners where smiles hid tension, it all came rushing back. I remembered one evening, years ago, when my wife had made a small joke at the dinner table, and her mother had shot a look that froze the room. At the time, I'd laughed it off, thinking it was nothing, just family quirks. But now, every subtle glance, every quiet sigh, every unspoken judgment replayed in my mind like a slow, merciless film. I sat in the living room, the soft morning light gone, replaced by a dull gray afternoon, and I realized how much we had underestimated the weight of perception. My wife's pain mirrored mine, confusion tangled with frustration, love tangled with hurt. I wondered if she had always felt this way, quietly carrying a sense of being misunderstood, or if this exclusion had finally cracked open old wounds we didn't even know existed. The silence between us wasn't peaceful anymore. It was loaded, waiting for words that might never come. I could feel the air thick around us, a mix of regret and helplessness, and I silently asked myself, had we really been blind, or had we simply chosen not to see? Then the lawyer dropped the part we weren't expecting. There was more to the will than just exclusion and resentment. Clauses, intentions, legal technicalities that made everything we thought we knew feel incomplete. I remember the papers spread across the kitchen table, edges crisp and almost threatening in their silence. The soft scratch of the lawyer's pen as he annotated margins echoed in the quiet room, each mark twisting my stomach a little tighter. So this isn't just about anger or family grudges, I thought, my mind racing. There's something else here, something we didn't see coming. My wife leaned over the table, her brow furrowed, eyes darting between the documents and me, seeking the reassurance I couldn't give. It was like staring at a locked door and realizing the key had been in plain sight all along, except none of us had bothered to look for it. The morning warmth and comfort we had felt only days ago had been replaced with an electric tension, the kind that prickles at your skin and makes your hands sweat. Every explanation from the lawyer felt like peeling back a layer of the truth, revealing more questions than answers. And in that moment, I realized that this story, the one we thought we knew, was far from over. I'll never forget the way she sat by the window that afternoon, the rain tapping softly against the glass, like a quiet metronome marking our heartbreak. Her shoulders slumped, hands pressed over her face, and I could hear the faint hitch of her breath, small, almost imperceptible, but it cut through me sharper than any words could. The betrayal wasn't just legal, it was personal, raw, a wound that came from the people who were supposed to love her without question. I wanted to reach out, to say something that could fix it, but the truth is, some things can't be fixed with words. The house smelled faintly of wet earth and coffee left on the counter, blending into the heaviness that hung between us. I traced back every memory I had of her mother, every smile that felt forced, every moment of tension I had dismissed. Each one now seemed like a warning we had ignored. And as I watched her, I felt my own helplessness mirrored in her pain. It was a quiet heartbreak, the kind that doesn't scream but seeps into your bones, leaving you numb yet painfully aware of the depth of what's been lost. How could they do this? I thought, not aloud, because I knew no words could make it right. We tried reaching out. Texts left unsent, phone calls that went unanswered, messages that hung in cyberspace like fragile paper boats waiting to sink. Each attempt to understand felt like walking a tightrope over a chasm we weren't ready to cross. I watched my wife pace the living room, back and forth, each step a mix of frustration and desperation. The park felt emptier than usual when we walked later, leaves swirling around our feet, as if mocking the futility of our search for answers. Every conversation we rehearsed in our heads, every possible way to approach her mother, ended in the same knot of anxiety tightening in our chests. We need clarity, I thought, the words bouncing around my skull. But are we even ready for the truth if it comes? Even in silence, tension filled the spaces between us, the air thick, with uncertainty and quiet rage at a situation we had no control over. It wasn't just about money or a will anymore. It was about trust, respect, and the invisible lines we thought couldn't be crossed. Each unanswered call and cold text chipped away at our patience, leaving a raw, aching question hanging over us. Would we ever really understand why this had happened? The truth hit like a sudden gust of wind, unexpected and disorienting. The lawyer explained everything. The real reason my wife had been excluded from the will. It wasn't anger, it wasn't resentment, not in the way we had imagined. There had been a technicality, a clause buried deep in legal jargon, one that twisted the story into something unrecognizable. I stared at the papers on the table, the margins filled with tiny, precise notes that suddenly made sense in a way they hadn't before. My wife's eyes widened, a mixture of disbelief and relief crossing her face, though the pain of what we'd assumed still lingered. The room smelled faintly of ink and polished wood, the soft afternoon light creating sharp contrasts on the documents. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to let it sink in, while my mind raced. All those sleepless nights, the doubts, the silent arguments, the guilt. It had been for something that wasn't what we thought. It didn't erase the heartbreak, but it shifted it, turning confusion into clarity. I realized then how much we had let assumptions shape our grief. How easily a story can be rewritten when the truth finally steps out of the shadows that in the days that followed, we began to breathe again, cautiously, like stepping onto solid ground after being tossed by a storm. The anger, confusion, and disbelief slowly gave way to quiet reflection. We talked more openly than we had in weeks, sharing thoughts we hadn't voiced, memories we had misinterpreted, and fears we hadn't admitted even to ourselves. Walking hand in hand through the park, watching the leaves swirl in the gentle wind, I realized how much this ordeal had shown us. About resilience, about the fragility of assumptions, about the strength in leaning on each other. The house felt lighter, the air cleaner, as if the tension that had once filled every corner had dissipated with our honest conversations. I caught myself smiling at her small jokes again, listening without judgment, and letting the past stay in the past where it belonged. We couldn't change what had happened, but we could choose how to carry it forward, how to honor our bond. Despite the hurt and confusion, for the first time in weeks, I felt that cautious, tentative sense of relief, a reminder that even after the deepest betrayal or misunderstanding, healing is possible, by the time we truly processed everything. There was a sense of calm that I hadn't felt in months. We had faced confusion, betrayal, heartbreak, and disbelief, and now we could finally breathe without the weight of unanswered questions pressing on our chests. The house felt like a home again, quiet but warm, with sunlight spilling across familiar corners that no longer seemed heavy with tension. We laughed softly over breakfast, packed away old letters and documents, and let the past settle where it belonged, not forgotten, but no longer sharp enough to hurt. I watched my wife smile genuinely, her eyes lighter, her shoulders relaxed, and I realized how much we had grown, not just as a couple, but as individuals learning to navigate life's unpredictability. Life wasn't about the grudges or the misunderstandings others held against us. It was about choosing how to move forward, how to hold on to what mattered, and how to let go of what didn't. As we stepped outside together, the world felt wide and open, full of possibilities. I knew there would be challenges ahead, but for the first time in a long while, I felt ready to face them, together.